Pregnant wife dies in labor. In-laws and mistress celebrate until the doctor whispers, "It's twins." The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Sarah Mitchell lay in the hospital bed, her breath coming in shallow gasps through the oxygen mask. The monitors beside her beeped steadily, tracking the vital signs that were growing weaker with each passing moment. She could hear them through the fog of pain and exhaustion, the voices outside her room barely contained, almost gleeful. Finally, her mother-in-law Patricia's voice cut through the hallway. "I never understood what David saw in her anyway." Sarah's eyes remained closed, but tears slipped down her temples. She'd known about the affair for months. David and his co-worker Amanda had been seeing each other for nearly a year, but Sarah had stayed silent, hoping against hope that he would choose his family when the baby came. Now, as her body struggled through the most difficult labor the medical team had seen in months, she could hear the truth of where his loyalties lay. "Once she's gone, we can finally move forward," Patricia continued, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "Amanda is so much more suitable for our family. Educated, refined, from the right background, through her partially open door, Sarah could see them gathered like vultures. Patricia stood with her arms crossed, her pearl necklace gleaming under the harsh hospital lights. Beside her, David's father Robert nodded along, checking his watch impatiently. And there, standing far too close to David, was Amanda herself, wearing a red dress that seemed obscenely vibrant against the sterile white walls, her hand possessively on David's arm. David said nothing. He simply stared at the floor, his jaw tight, offering no defense of his dying wife. The contractions intensified, and Sarah bit back a cry of pain. The medical team had explained the complications in hushed, urgent tones. Placental abruption, severe hemorrhaging. They'd already performed an emergency cesarean section, but the bleeding wouldn't stop. She'd heard the words critical condition and prepared for the worst whispered between doctors and nurses, who thought she was unconscious. Dr. Rachel Morrison, the lead obstetrician, stepped out of Sarah's room, her face grave. She approached the group in the hallway, and they immediately straightened, arranging their expressions into something resembling appropriate concern. "How much longer?" Patricia asked, dispensing with any pretense of grief. Dr. Morrison's eyes narrowed. In her 20 years of practice, she'd seen many things, but the cold calculation in this family's faces chilled her to the bone. "Mrs. Mitchell is fighting very hard. She's lost a significant amount of blood, but we're doing everything we can." Of course, Robert said dismissively. "We understand these things happen, nature taking its course and all that." Amanda stepped forward, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "And the baby? Is the baby healthy?" That's what Sarah would want us to focus on, the future. The possessive way she said the future while looking at David made Dr. Morrison's stomach turn. She'd delivered hundreds of babies and comforted countless families through loss, but never had she witnessed such blatant anticipation of a patient's death. "The baby is stable," Dr. Morrison replied curtly, revealing nothing more. Inside the room, a nurse named Jennifer held Sarah's hand, tears streaming down her own face. "Stay with us, Sarah," she whispered. "Your baby needs you. Don't let them win." But Sarah's grip was weakening. She could feel herself slipping away, her vision tunneling. The last thing she heard before losing consciousness was Patricia's voice, barely contained. "How much longer do we have to wait?" 2 hours passed. The celebration in the hallway had grown less guarded. Patricia had gone to the cafeteria and returned with coffee for everyone. Everyone except the nurse who'd asked if she wanted to send anything in for Sarah. "No point in wasting money on someone who's already gone," Patricia had said with a dismissive wave. David remained mostly silent, but Sarah had watched through her brief moments of consciousness as Amanda whispered in his ear, painted his future with words of comfort and new beginnings. She saw him nod, saw his shoulders relax slightly, saw him glance at his watch. He was counting down the minutes until he was free. Dr. Morrison emerged once more, and this time her face was unreadable. The group in the hallway immediately quieted, arranging themselves into a tableau of bereaved family members for the benefit of passing hospital staff. "I need to speak with Mr. Mitchell," Dr. Morrison said firmly. "Alone." David stepped forward, and for a moment, something that might have been guilt flickered across his face. But Amanda squeezed his arm encouragingly, and it vanished. They moved to a small consultation room, and Dr. Morrison closed the door behind them. Through the window, the family waited, Patricia already pulling out her phone, likely to start making arrangements. "Mr. Mitchell," Dr. Morrison began, her voice carefully controlled, "your wife has been through a traumatic delivery." "I understand," David said quickly. "These things happen. No one's to blame. We'll handle the arrangements." "I'm not finished," Dr. Morrison interrupted sharply. "The delivery was complicated because we discovered something during the cesarean section. Something your wife apparently knew but chose not to share, perhaps because she suspected how the information would be received." David frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Dr. Morrison opened the door and gestured for him to follow. They walked down the hallway, past the waiting area where his family immediately stood, expectant. "Where are we going?" Patricia demanded. "Mr. Mitchell needs to see something," Dr. Morrison replied without slowing. They arrived at the nursery window, where 2 incubators sat side by side, each containing a tiny infant wrapped in hospital blankets. One wore a pink cap, the other blue. David stared, uncomprehending. "Congratulations, Mr. Mitchell," Dr. Morrison said, her voice taking on an edge of satisfaction. "You're the father of twins, a boy and a girl. They're both healthy, breathing on their own, and doing remarkably well considering the traumatic circumstances of their birth." The color drained from David's face. Behind them, the footsteps of the others approached, and then silence fell as they too saw the 2 babies. How?" Patricia stammered. "Your wife was carrying twins," Dr. Morrison continued, turning to face them all. "The second baby was hidden behind the first during most of the ultrasounds. It happens occasionally, especially when the mother is working with a less attentive prenatal care provider. Mrs. Mitchell apparently discovered this during a routine checkup a few months ago and chose not to share the information with any of you. Jennifer, the nurse who'd been caring for Sarah, stepped forward from where she'd been waiting nearby. Sarah told me she knew how you all felt about her," she said, her voice shaking with anger. She heard Patricia say at Thanksgiving that one baby was bad enough, that Sarah was trying to trap David with a pregnancy. She decided that if she couldn't rely on any of you to be happy about one child, she certainly wouldn't give you the opportunity to pressure her about 2. The group stood frozen, the implications sinking in. 2 babies meant double the legal obligation, double the child support if David left, double the inheritance rights, double the connection to a woman they'd spent months hoping would simply disappear from their lives. Amanda's face had gone pale, her hand dropping from David's arm. "2?" she whispered. "And as for Mrs. Mitchell," Dr. Morrison continued, her tone making it clear she'd heard every word spoken in the hallway over the past hours, "she's been stabilized. The bleeding has been controlled. She's weak. She'll need extensive recovery time, but she's going to survive." The joy that had been barely concealed on their faces moments ago evaporated entirely, replaced by shock and something that looked uncomfortably like panic. "She's alive?" Patricia breathed. "Very much so," Dr. Morrison confirmed. "In fact, she's been conscious for the past 20 minutes. The medication we gave her has helped with the pain, and while she's very weak, she's been able to hear everything said in the hallway. Everything." The color that had drained from David's face now flooded back in a deep red. Robert suddenly became very interested in his shoes. Amanda took a step backward, as if distance might somehow erase her presence from the past few hours. We should go see her," David stammered. "Actually," Dr. Morrison said coolly, "Mrs. Mitchell has made it very clear that she doesn't wish to see any of you right now. She's asked that only Jennifer be allowed in her room. However, she has requested that I deliver a message." She pulled out a folded piece of paper. Sarah had managed to write it in shaky handwriting during her moments of consciousness. Mrs. Mitchell wants you to know that she heard every single word spoken in that hallway. She knows exactly how each of you felt about her potential death. She knows about the affair, Mr. Mitchell, though she says she's known for months. And she wants you to understand that while she may have stayed silent before for the sake of trying to preserve a family, what she heard today has made certain decisions very clear for her. Dr. Morrison looked directly at David. She's instructed me to inform you that you'll be hearing from her lawyer regarding divorce and custody arrangements. She's also asked me to tell your mother, Mrs. Patricia Mitchell, that she will never, under any circumstances, be allowed unsupervised access to her grandchildren. Patricia gasped. She can't do that. I have rights. Actually, Jennifer interjected, pulling out her phone, given that multiple hospital staff members heard you celebrating what you believed was her impending death, expressing relief at the idea of her dying, and discussing how much better off you'd all be without her, I think any court would take Mrs. Mitchell's concerns about your influence on her children very seriously. I took the liberty of recording some of what was said. For documentation purposes, the legal implications hit them like a physical blow. Patricia swayed slightly, gripping Robert's arm for support. Amanda had already begun backing away, clearly recognizing that her fantasy of stepping into Sarah's life had just been incinerated. David reached for her, but she shook her head, her eyes wide. I didn't sign up for this, Amanda said quietly. I thought, this is too much. I can't. She turned and fled down the hallway, her red dress disappearing around the corner. David stood alone, watching her go, the weight of his choices finally settling on his shoulders. When can I see my wife? He asked quietly. That, Dr. Morrison said firmly, is entirely up to her, and given what I've witnessed today, I wouldn't recommend holding your breath. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a patient to check on. A patient who just survived something that would have killed most people, not because of any help from her family, but in spite of them. She turned on her heel and walked back toward Sarah's room, leaving the group standing in stunned silence before the nursery window, staring at the two tiny lives that had just irrevocably changed everything. Inside her room, Sarah lay with tears streaming down her face, not from pain, but from relief and a strange, fierce joy. Jennifer held her hand gently. You did it, Jennifer whispered. You survived, and your babies are perfect. Sarah nodded weakly, her eyes closing. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and difficult conversations and the hard work of building a new life. But tonight, she had survived. And her children, her two beautiful children, were safe. In the nursery, a nurse adjusted the blanket around the baby girl, who opened her eyes briefly before settling back to sleep. Beside her, her brother yawned, his tiny fist curling against his cheek. They had no idea of the drama that had unfolded around their birth, no concept of the betrayal and cruelty that had filled the hallways while their mother fought for life. All they knew was warmth, safety, and the steady rhythm of machines that monitored their perfect, healthy heartbeats. And that, Sarah thought as consciousness began to fade into healing sleep, was exactly how it should be. Whatever came next, whatever battles lay ahead, her children would be protected from the people who had stood in that hallway and celebrated what they believed was their mother's death. The twins had saved her in more ways than one, and she would spend the rest of her life making sure they never regretted it.